Michelle 360, and I just wanted to come on here real quick because I just saw this news story and I didn't really pay too much attention to it, but I really wanted to like ask you guys more about it because I know that a lot of you are more invested in some of the fringier aspects of K-pop than I am. But I saw the news story about how the CEO of the company that manages Omega X were filmed berating members of the group. Um, and one specific member who I guess had been complaining of being injured and was like, I need to sit out because I'm injured. And the CEO was like, if you want to be an idol, you need to push through it. I can't believe you're trying to like sit out. You're being a baby or I don't know. I tried to watch the translations, but I was just like, uh, it's not doing anything for me because you can't tell who's saying what because it's like aimed at the ground. Anyway, I was just thinking about how we would never be talking about this if this was just an accusation that somebody made in print. The reason why we're talking about it is because it's caught on tape. And I was just thinking about how, like, so many things could be solved if you could just get it on tape. And not even like big stuff like this, because this is, a big deal for these boys, but just a lot of stuff if you could just get it on tape. Now, here in America, it's a weird situation in that if you're videotaping something that happens like in public, then you're allowed to videotape it. If it's in a public space, no one is entitled to privacy, therefore, you are allowed to tape it. If you are in the private confines of a home, being able to tape something actually has everything to do with whether or not your state is a one party or a two-party state. So if you live in one of the states, which is one of the smaller divisions inside the United States, if you live in a state and you live in a two-party state, then you can't record inside of a private residence or you can't record a phone call without both people giving permission to record. Whereas if you're in a one-party state, if you are the one recording and you know you're recording and it's a two-way conversation, it doesn't matter if you're in private, if you're in public, if it's over the phone, if it's in person, you're allowed to record. And if you have cameras set up in your home and someone comes inside your home, you're supposed to tell them that you have cameras if it's a two-party state. But anyway, back to the lecture at hand. I remember years and years ago, let me know if you remember, years and years ago, I remember that Big Hit got in trouble because somebody recorded evidence that the managers were being mean to Jungkook, I think specifically in BTS before BTS got real big. Like this was during, I want to say this was during the Dark and Wild promotions, maybe. Which I mean, at this point in time, something like that would be completely unthinkable. Like you just couldn't even imagine that happening anymore. But because it was captured, the management company, Big Hit Umbrella, was like, "Yeah, this is unacceptable." No, they said this is a misunderstanding, is what they said. It was a misunderstanding. Nothing actually happened. We're sorry if you guys thought that there were bad things going on here. The thing that allowed them to say that it was a misunderstanding was the fact that even though I want to say that the video was of them pushing Jungkook, I believe it was, there was no sound, so you can hear anything. This video has sound. So you can actually hear the exact words that the CEO is saying to these boys about their performance and about their job. And again, this would have been a story that would have disappeared because this is a new group. And I mean, I had never even heard of Omega X until this story. So it's not like they had a bunch of visibility for people to say, oh my gosh, this is like a top group in the country. I can't believe somebody would treat them this way. But it's all about having it on tape. Get it on tape. And on tape solves so much. Even though there are times when getting on tape can lead to misunderstandings because definitely people manipulate tape all the time. A grand example of that would be Taylor Swift. I'm not a big fan of Taylor Swift. I know some of you love Taylor Swift. I'm not gonna talk bad about her, but she doesn't do the music that I normally listen to. I'm not a fan of her voice, so that's the reason why we don't really mesh in that way. But I remember when Kanye West recorded his conversation with Taylor Swift, and then Taylor Swift, I guess, was mad because he used her likeness and her name in a song. And Kanye said she gave me permission. And then Kim Kardashian put out a snippet of a recording where I guess she's telling Kanye, yeah, that sounds like a cool idea. But then later on, the whole tape came out and it was like, actually, no, she gave permission for something else, not this particular thing. Context means everything. But if you know you're in the right and you know that you're doing something where you're kind of above reproach, like if they have the whole context, absolutely get it on tape. That's what matters. Get it on tape. We live in a society that, because we're used to so many people using psychological manipulation against us, whether it's being in a relationship, being gaslit, being at a company and your boss is trying to manipulate you into doing more work than you should because they're saying you could be in line for a raise at some point, or the higher ups are looking at you, or we're a family and family puts in a little overtime for each other. Get it on tape. Get it on tape. If you can't get it on tape, get it in writing. That's the second best thing. I cannot tell you how many times a job will say, well, we didn't say that, or that's not what we wanted you to do. Get it on tape. Get it in writing. That's the way you're supposed to do these things. But I think a lot about the fact that, like, the Tiara situation in particular, at that time, everybody had cell phones. Everybody had camera phones. If this girl was really being bullying, it wouldn't have been anything for her to pull out a phone and set it on a table and record these girls bashing her. But that's not what happened because they didn't bully her like that. But her whole story came apart because somebody was filming her being an asshole to a verified celebrity. They caught the full context of her showing her true ass. Somebody got recordings of her talking to her sister. They got text messages of the sisters plotting against each other. They had receipts, real receipts. And in this time and place, it sucks that, along with having to record everybody and everything and saving every text message and so on and so forth, it also means that you're never having a private conversation with anybody. Like, that's a fact. You're never kind of going into a room with someone and just talking from the heart and not expecting that conversation to leave the room. But I think that, because so much can be taken out of proportion, like, you just have to live with that in your mind, that there's no such thing as privacy anymore. Or at least there's no such thing as privacy when it comes to being a bad person. There is a such thing as privacy when it comes to at least having a legal protection for revenge porn and some of these other things. But when it comes to, like, people being bad and doing bad, get it on tape. Always get it on tape. I feel bad for these guys because I have a feeling that this is not going to help their careers one bit. People are going to feel bad for Omega X. If Omega X manages to leave their company in the next week or two, then yeah, they might see a little uptick on their next release with a different company. But if they stay with this company after the company has said, "Oh, this was just a bad day. This isn't what things are normally like," they're not going to see a big turnout for their next release because people are going to say, I don't want to buy this album because I don't want to give the CEO money. And that's a conundrum with these kinds of situations, is like, you want to support the artist because you want to see them get a little bit of money, but especially in a new group like this, new kids don't make money. That's just a fact. Even in huge companies like YG, the new guys don't make money because they're having to pay back all of the training. And depending on the shady accounting of a lot of these companies, that training can go anywhere from maybe $20,000 to sometimes a $500,000. And so it's really hard to get out from underneath these contracts because they're not independently kept records. That's one of the reasons why it was so difficult for BAP when they left their record label, returned. They should have never returned to TS. And that's the reason why so many other people have a hard time breaking their contracts, because when they're asked, okay, put it on paper, how much money do I owe you? The record company could say, well, I bought you lunch. That lunch was $20. Even if the lunch was just a Subway sandwich, it was $20 because I paid somebody to go to get you the lunch. So you're paying for the food plus you're paying for their time to go get the lunch and come back. Or if you say, well, you got me an outfit, how much did the outfit cost? Well, the shirt itself cost $15, but because the shirt was something that we purchased from a person who's a costume designer, we have to pay for their time as well. Or even like a record, when they say, well, how much did it cost for you to make this record? Because these artists do have to pay for record production. That's not for free. That comes out of the money from the purchase, the sale of the record. Like, well, we had to have a meeting about the concept. We had to go to dinner with the director in order to convince them to come on and do the project. The CEO had to do location scouting, so we have to pay for their travel. The CEO had to have lunch with the guy from the radio station, so that cost money. Like, all these things get piled in there. So by the time a company has said this is what it costs to make this album, you're including all kinds of stuff that has nothing to do with making this album, but that's because the record company controls the numbers. And these acts don't ever get access to these numbers until it's time for them to leave, or until it's time to sue because they're saying they're not being paid as much as they deserved. And there are lots of acts throughout the history of K-pop that will tell you they made nothing for years. They don't start making until they could actually tour well. And once they could tour well, then they could make money. In fact, I'd be shocked if, I would say, any group that only made it to about 4 years, I'd be shocked if any of them ever made any money. Because it's just not built that way. It's not built for anybody to make any money. But I digress. Another thing I think about, and it's just because somebody recently left a comment on one of my Bright review videos, which I feel like that was a world away, but that was literally just this summer. So I did a review for Jessica Jung's book Bright, and I broke it up. I did like 2 chapters every day or every couple of days until I finished the book. And there's a scene in the book where Jessica Jung is brought into a conference room, her and her mother, and she's told that she can no longer continue with Girls Forever. Not Jessica, but her character. And I remember saying in my video review, like, she should have recorded this. Like, she should have turned on her cell phone and recorded this. Because now we're still many, many years later, we're still at he said, she said. We're still some people saying that she was kicked out of the group because the members were jealous. Then we have other people saying she was kicked out of the group because she was not showing up to things and she had been plotting all along to leave and she decided to take her exit early, or I guess they called her on her bluff. But yeah, all this, every single bit of this could be solved if there was a recording. If somebody had decided to take out a fucking cell phone and record a conversation that people had. But I don't know what the recording rules are in Korea. I think because this happened outside in the street, they were able to like release the recording without there being any legal ramifications on anything. But if this had happened in a boardroom or if this had happened in a training room, it may have been something different. Because again, there's a difference between public space and private space, and I don't know what the rules are in terms of like two party, one party recording in Korea. So I don't know, but I'd like to think that you can, because that was part of the whole reason why so many people got caught with like drug scandals, is because they were recorded either trying to do drugs or they had text messages showing they were asking for drugs, stuff like that. Anyway, I just want to talk about that real quick, but also I just want to talk about a couple of other things. I'm on my lunch break. I have at least a few more minutes so I can talk about stuff. Um, so I don't think that anything has really come out recently that has made me love K-pop to the point where I'm kind of branching out of my faves. But I did something really fun the other day. There is a website which I'm sure you guys already know. It's called Ubu Fufu, I believe is the name of the website. And they do these like competition bracket challenges. So you go to the website and you just type in like a keyword. So let's say your keyword is K-pop. And they have all of these brackets that people put on there where they're like, best K-pop visual or best BTS song or best boy band comeback or best second generation song. And you go on there, and if you choose to do that challenge, basically you have to like go through and pick this one or that one, this one or that one. And I did like 3 of them in one day, which was surprising because it was a lot. It was like whittling down 500 plus different songs to figure out your favorite one. It was a mess. Anyway, I did one that was like best K-pop comeback, and it's randomized. Like the person who does these challenges, they pick like maybe 700 songs, but you're only presented with like 500 of these songs. So I did like best K-pop comeback, and there were all of these songs by these girl groups that I had never heard before. never heard before, like new girl groups. And I was like, oh my gosh, this song is so interesting. Oh my gosh, this song is so cool. Oh my gosh, this is so amazing. I've never heard this before. And I was just thinking to myself, like, how does one go about discovering new K-pop anymore? Like, I know that sometimes you'll hear about a new group because they have like this big chart leap and it'll show up on Simpy News, or some people just subscribe to like different Spotify playlists and new songs come up there. But like, if you really wanted to dig into a group nowadays and like really get to know the members, get to know their videos, like, what is the tactic that people use to get to know these groups now? Like, do people spend most of their time on TikTok watching videos of these groups? Do people spend most of their time looking at compilation videos on YouTube? Do people spend time following them on Twitter? Like, what is the method now? Because I feel like I don't know. Even at this late point in the game, and I mean, this is late considering the first time I saw NCT as a group was when they did Seventh Sense. And here we are years later, and I cannot name a majority of those boys. Like, if somebody put a chart of the members out and said, you need to start matching up names, I got about 5 people whose names I know off the bat. Otherwise, I do not know these boys. I could not pick them up out of a lineup. You could mix them in with other members of other Nugu groups. I'm like, oh yeah, that's probably an NCT member. I would fail. And so I'm just wondering, like, how do people catch up with stuff? I think I've told this story before, but the way that I got to know Shiny was through fan fiction. I know, disgusting, but true. When I first got into K-pop, I got to learn K-pop through a series of trials and errors. The first K-pop song I ever heard in my entire life was Nobody. I was a fan of the Wendy Williams radio show. She got a television show. Her first musical act on her television show was the Wonder Girls. I remember thinking, like, this song is weird. I don't understand what they're saying, but I like their costumes. I want to know more about them. Then later on, the Wonder Girls appeared in Justice, and I was like, oh, that's that same group that was on the Wendy Williams show. Well, I like this song. I wonder what they're about. Then the very next K-pop song I heard was Goodbye Baby Goodbye by Miss A, because it was on the front page of YouTube back when YouTube used to put the most popular video of the day, regardless of region, on the front page of YouTube. So then that started me being like, I've been seeing a lot of Asian pop music lately. Maybe I need to get into this. And then like 2012 was my big year of like learning all the K-pop. It was also the year that I started watching Simon and Martina's channel, Eat Your Kimchi. I would watch their K-pop Music Mondays. But I remember very specifically watching their K-pop Music Mondays and that being a way to like discover new artists for me. And then Martina on a Tumblr post, I believe, said, "Don't read AO3. It'll no, not AO3. She said, don't read Asian fanfic. It'll mess you up." And I'm like, well, now that you've told me not to do it, I must do it. So I went to asianfanfic.com and I just typed in Shiny because that was the only group I was really interested in trying to learn more about at the time. And I started reading stories. And it really made it to where the members of Shiny stood out to me. Prior to that, I could not tell you who Jonghyun was. I could not tell you who Key was. I could not tell you who Taemin was. It was just those 5 guys. And that got me more into it because people would take like videos, interviews, clips from television shows, and they would mention them as part of like the canon for these fan fictions. And that's how I really got to know Shiny. And then also watching the season of Hello Baby, that helped me to get to know Shiny, and watching some other variety stuff. And like that's how I crept into knowing them. But now I'm like, okay, I'd like to get to know NCT a little bit more. The reason I want to get to know NCT a little bit more is because I feel like even though I enjoy some of their music, I can't really pick apart whose voice is what for a lot of the different members who aren't like the prime members. I don't really know what the other members specialize in. There's so many of them. And now the Dreamies are all like grown. That's the other thing. Like, I didn't want to know who any of the Dreamies were when they first debuted because they were literally children. Like, you could look at the faces in the chewing gum video. Those are babies. Those are itty bitty babies. And so I didn't want to have anything to do with them. But now I'm at a point where I'm like, I would like to know more about them. I spend money on NCT's music. I'd like to know more about them. But I'm like, where to start? Do I start with fan fiction? I don't think so because I don't really learn anything about them from fan fiction. Like, I just finished a fanfic on AO3 about NCT, and it only was involving like four main people from NCTU. Um, and then there were like a sprinkling of other NCT people dropped in there. And I had to like research the photographs of these people to make sure I could like keep them up in my mind who they were in this story. And the story was a really cool story. It wasn't a smutty story. It was a story from an author called Gen 4 Inc. It's GINFORINK, Gen 4 Inc. Anyway, one of my favorite authors on AO3 used to write a lot of BTS fan fiction, has moved on to NCT fan fiction, but it was a story about hybrids, not in the Omega Alpha verse, not that thing, and not like in a gross way. I realize by saying hybrids, there's a lot of you that have your hackles up and like, oh wow, you're reading something really nasty. I promise you, this was not nasty. And Jen Frank is a very talented writer. It's like reading novels. It's like really good stuff. Anyway, uh, the story was about 20 years after hybrids had been given their right to be seen as human beings. Like I said, this is a very involved story. And so 20 years ago, hybrids won the right to be seen as human beings instead of being seen as animals or as like pets, if you will. And so after that, governments around the world set up funding and housing protections for hybrids because of the fact that they were just not being given their status as human beings. And a lot of them, because of the fact that they had been genetically engineered, they had a lot of physical challenges that precluded them from being able to do real work. Plus, they had this societal disadvantage of being seen as these creatures. And so it was Rinjin, who is, I think he's a member of Dreamies, maybe. I don't know. I don't know which sub bands they're all in. Anyway, Rinjin moves into an apartment with Haechan, Gino, and Jamin. And they're all in an apartment together. Gino is a Samoyed, like a dog hybrid. Jamin is a rabbit hybrid. Haechan is a grizzly bear hybrid, even though he's small for a grizzly bear. And Rinjin is like a Siamese cat hybrid. And they're all living in this apartment and they're all having to help Haechan because Haechan is a bear human hybrid. And because of the fact that he's part bear, he has to hibernate, which you could imagine like a human being having to sleep for like 3 or 4 months at a time, all the challenges that would make. And so they're having to like help him to make sure he eats, make sure that his clothes are washed, make sure his sheets are cleaned, make sure that, if he has any kind of accidents or anything, that that's cleaned up, even though he doesn't pee on himself. But I'm just saying, like, they have to take care of him basically, because it's like he's got a severe case of narcolepsy. But as I was trying to like put names to faces, and then like different members of NCT show up in the story. So you have Chinle who shows up, you had Mark who showed up at one point, Jisung showed up at one point, and there's one more person who showed up whose name I can't recall. Oh, Johnny. Johnny showed up at one point as a trainer. Anyway, I'm like having to again put names to faces and try to figure out who these people are. Like I knew who Mark and Johnny were, but I really didn't know a lot of the other boys. And I'm like, okay, so now that I've read the story, I at least could put a name to a face for these four main characters. Plus, I can do a name to a face for Chinle because I just didn't know this kid's face at all. Um, but for the rest of the 20 plus members of NCT that I need to try to get to know, where do you go to find out information about them in a way that's easy to digest? Because people act like it's easy, but it's not. It took me so long to figure out EXO. It took me like, I want to say 3 months after they debuted for me to figure out who all was who in EXO. And again, fan fiction is how I found out. I read some fan fictions and I was like, oh, okay. So Dio is the little one with the deep voice. Beckon is the other little one with the deep voice. But Dio's the one with the big lips who has the deep voice who's little. Like it was like that. That's how I got to know them. So like I just don't know how people get to know groups anymore, especially groups from smaller companies. Like at least with a bigger company, they're always on television. They're always doing something where their content meets the press. But if you're trying to get to know weekly, how do you get to know them? How do you get to know them as people? What are the avenues that people go to get to know these people? Like, I don't know. It just seems very intimidating for me. And I say that as somebody who, like I said, I haven't invested as much time in K-pop as I used to, but just on a personal level, it feels very intimidating for me. But that's what I want to talk about with that. And then I'm gonna be watching another BL finally. It's been forever since I've talked about BL on my channel, and me and Mason, we haven't been doing Busy Thinking About Boys. We've decided to cancel that just because both of us just can't devote the time to a regularly scheduled product anymore. But I've been hearing really good things about a BL called The Eclipse on GMM TV. So I've decided I'm going to try watching that. And if it's a successful watch, the last episode is on Friday. If I'm successful at watching that, then I'll be doing a review of that. And then I'll be taking suggestions as to which BLs I should talk about. That way I can start to get into the habit of getting back into that, because at this point I don't know any of the new actors. I've not even watched Ken Porsche. I didn't finish Not Me. I need to finish that. It had a wild first episode. Like, there's just so much I need to catch up with. So that's the next thing I'm doing. But anyway, this has been fun. Like I said, I'm on my lunch hour, so I need to go pick up my lunch and head back to my office. But this was fun. This was fun. I hope you guys had fun too. And I'm sorry if I was like all over the place with this live. There really, to me, there's not as much to talk about with this whole Omega X story, only because, like I said, this is not a group I really know that much about. This kind of feels like Nugu shenanigans in a little bit. Not that I'm saying that being abusive is shenanigans. I would never say that, because like being abusive is a serious thing. But it's also one of those deals where, like, I think all of us kind of assume that new groups get abused. I know that sounds really callous and cruel, but for some reason, like, it is canon to me when it comes to K-pop that Nugu groups get treated shitty. That's just like it's in my head canon, because I'm thinking about like Ladies Code, how they were a Nugu group that was forced to do a performance and then get on the road during the shittiest of weather with a driver who didn't know what the fuck they were doing, who ended up getting into a car accident and killing two members of Ladies Code. Like, that's the kind of Nugu shenanigans I'm talking about, where it's just like they get treated the very worst. They get worked half to death. They get the worst promotions. They get the worst costuming. If they're with a company that has no morals or scruples, they get pimped out. They're expected to get sugar daddies or get sugar mamas, or sugar daddies and sugar daddies. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, like, it is a miracle that groups like Mamamoo make it out of the game. Like, I just think about that all the time. How, like, when Mamamoo first debuted with Mr. MMO, Mr. Ambiguous, that was such a shock that they were able to keep going, because Mr. Ambiguous was like low key a popular song, but it wasn't blowing up the charts. People weren't like, oh wow, this is the best thing we've ever heard. Then after that, it was Mr. Piano Man, and there were people who liked it, but it was also like a limited print, didn't really blow up the way it should have. But then they had like a huge song with yeah. And people were like, okay, this group is really doing big things. And then from there, they had a couple of misses. Then they came back with really big songs. I'm thinking Starry Night in particular. And Mamamoo is now like an established act. Also, Huasa is a dream. But yeah, like, when they first came out, if you look at the Mr. MMO video, they don't look the same, number one. And number two, it was a weird video. It was a weird ass video. So the fact that they became who they were is shocking. The fact that BTS became who they are is actually, quite frankly, very shocking. I'm trying to think of some other like Nugu groups who broke out of the Nugu curse. The fact that we still talk about Luna is actually exciting, because Luna really was kind of like this weird rando project that had these really strange promotions, and yet here we are years later, and they're actually considered like a go-to group in some ways. Like, I don't think that I've bought a Luna album in years, but people still care about Luna, and that's surprising. So I think there are some Nukus that break out, but in terms of like hearing tales of Nukus being abused, or like coming out on their debut and then a week later disbanding, that's just never surprising because that's just kind of how it is. Another one, EXID, they had a really good run too, even though if you go back to the history of EXID, almost disbanded, a viral fan cam brought them to life. Literally, the first, if you go to the first, I want to say two, three singles of EXID and you look at how those singles charted, how they were able to perform on music shows, stuff like that, the fact that they got to even perform on music shows is amazing because those songs didn't do well. Like in terms of like expanding the brand, didn't do well. There used to be a group called Bestie, and I want to say like three-quarters of the members of the group Bestie came from EXID because EXID used to be a bigger group, and then like a bunch of girls left EXID. They hired another couple of girls to fill in the holes, and then they released Up and Down. Up and Down sounded the same when they released it as it did when it became popular. But it wasn't a popular song when it released because it came from a Nugu group. But then they did what every Nugu group does in Korea. They decided to perform for the troops because that's a big thing in Korea. If you're a girl group and you want to kind of get, at least a performance out there, you go to the military base and you perform for the military guys. Well, some thirsty motherfucker in the audience decided that Hani was the hottest girl on stage. And when they went to perform Up and Down, camera lightning still filming her hip thrust. That video went big viral, huge viral, saved their group. Every song that came out after that, you only get because that fan cam went viral because they were scheduled to break up after that song came out. Like that's how close they were to the edge. And so, yeah, I think it's always a miracle when a Nugu group makes it. Another one, Justin, you're right. The army's saving Brave Girls. Like guys in the military, be like girl group songs aren't really for us anymore, but this Brave Girls song, we really love it. And then all of a sudden, after it being out for what, a year, 2 years, it blows up. So yeah, I think about that all of the time. I think about the fact that when it comes to, these girl groups and just new groups in general, like it takes a lucky strike for them to make it. Even Laboom, who I heard that Laboom might be breaking up soon, but apparently Laboom got popular after their manager died. I want to say it was their manager, but like Laboom had been going. No, it was Berry Berry. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it Berry Berry or Laboom? One of those two groups. One of them, like their manager died, and the news hit that their manager had died, and that they performed a song for their manager, and that brought them back. It's crazy to me how this shit works when it comes to like just a lucky shot making it happen for a group. Yeah, GFriend. GFriend actually got a lot of attention when they first came out because of the fact that GFriend's first song, Glass Bead, sounded so much like a Girls' Generation Into the New World style song that they're like, oh, they're trying to be like Girls' Generation. Joke's on you. No one can ever be like Girls' Generation. Brah! So like they had a lot of attention on them for the fact that like they were giving very much Girls' Generation tease. But then they did a performance of, I think it was Tough. They did a performance of Tough in the rain, and I can't remember which member of the group it was now, but one of the members of the group like just kept falling and kept falling and kept falling, and everybody else was still dancing. She kept getting up and kept dancing, and people were like, "Oh my gosh, we're in love with them because they work so hard and they keep falling, but they keep fading back up." Meanwhile, me, a seasoned K-pop fan, was like, they should have let this girl sit down. Like she's risking bruising herself, twisting something, breaking something. Like, yeah, we all love that performance, but this is too much. This is unsafe. But I mean, I think the same thing happened with like FX. They had a video of them falling down miserably in performances. That's a thing. Korea likes to watch people fall down and get back up. Don't know why that's so popular. But yeah, like it's fucking luck. It is fucking luck if you're able to make it. Really and truly it is. It's like either a gimmick or you're just really lucky and something hits. Even Pentagon, like I think about the fact that like Pentagon has been around for a while now. And Pentagon did not hit until Shine. And I don't think they've hit since, in my opinion. But they had Cube behind them. Pentagon should have been a hit out the gate because they had Cube behind them, but they weren't. And so you can imagine like what a disappointment it is when a big company releases a group and they can't push a group forward. You can imagine then how hard it is for a Nugu group where people don't know their company. They don't know their company. They don't know their idols. They know nothing about these folks. Yet and still, they're expected to like bring in the sales and pay back all these massive invisible debts that they have. And then I think somebody just mentioned New East. New East was super popular when they first came out. New East was a Nugu group that decided that they would do something that no one else had done. They decided they would like really lean into kind of a fanficky way that girls see boy bands, and they decided that one member, Ren, would be kind of like the feminine girlish member, and the other members would all be kind of like half in love with Ren. I don't know why this was the way that they came out with this, but when you guys think that like people aren't reading your fan fictions or looking at your little fantasy sequences on the internet, you're wrong. Record company executives are watching and listening to this stuff all the time, all the time. Anyway, so after years of reading fan fiction about how the girlier members of groups would need to be protected by the big burly members of the groups, fucking New East, their company said, we're gonna come out the gate like this. And their first song was like massive, massive, massive. They were like, oh, who's New East? They're so great. And then like every song after that just did nothing. Did no numbers, didn't go anywhere. People were forgetting about New East. Didn't want anything to do with them practically, it seemed, even though New East was putting out really good music. I think even Rin ended up going to China and like modeling clothes in China. Like things were bad for the group. Then someone had the idea of putting all of the members of New East on produce. Every single one of them. And it worked. One of the members actually got into the end group. Meanwhile, the other ones were like, we're going to do a comeback because, baby, the public wants us now. It bought New East, I would say, at least another 3 years. At least another 3 years. And it's just shocking because, like, again, knew it shouldn't have happened. And the fact that Produce brought them back when everyone had forgot about them, too bad UKISS didn't decide to get on there either. Love Paint was a really good song. Actually, New East is I wouldn't say broken up, but I guess like they've gone on hiatus. Anywho, if you haven't had a chance, New East has released like a greatest hits kind of album. It's re-recordings of like comeback songs and title songs they've had over the years. It's actually a really good album. I highly recommend buying it. But anyway, yeah, like it is just really tough trying to like make it work even if you're from an established label. And like New East was from an established label. New East was the same label that 17 is on, and After School. Like this wasn't like a label that nobody had ever heard of before. This was a big label. But yeah, New East just was floundering. But again, sometimes it just doesn't work. I'm thinking very specifically of Boyfriend. Boyfriend, I'm thinking about heavy because Boyfriend was from Starship and Pledis. Thank you. Uh, Boyfriend was from Starship, and Starship had Sistar. Starship is where Monster X comes from. Starship had a lot of like indie solo singers, solo rappers. Like Starship was a really good label. Starship could not get Boyfriend off the ground. They tried so hard. They tried every concept they could with Boyfriend. They could not make Boyfriend work. Boyfriend even had twins. They had twin members in the group. Nothing they did could get Boyfriend off the ground. And it was crazy to me because, like, again, Sistar, right there, sitting in the audience, could not get Boyfriend off the ground. And so, yeah, it is luck out here. It is luck out here. You can't you have a tough time engineering a way to make a small group popular in K-pop. Like it really is fucking luck of the draw. I'd much rather work for a large company. I don't think they have to work nearly as hard as a Nugu company to get a group off the ground. Like fucking the Ark. I'll leave it at that. The last group I'm going to talk about is the Ark. Do you guys remember The Light by the Ark? Some of you may be too young to remember this, but I'm only laughing because it's just sad. And like it's just so there was a group called the Ark who was a new girl group. It was like different trainees from different companies that they just couldn't debut, so they decided to get together and they trained really hard. And they were getting a little bit of notice because they were doing like dance covers of boy songs, and that was kind of like getting people interested in them. Well, they released a song called The Light, and the video for The Light is one of the greatest K-pop videos ever made. I'm not even exaggerating. It literally is one of the great. There's two K-pop videos that every K-pop fan should watch, whether or not they like the music. You don't have to like the music, but there are two K-pop videos every K-pop fan should watch, in my opinion. The first is The Ark's The Light, and the second is Please Don't by K Will. Those two videos for me are, if you want to understand why it was second generation K-pop was so special, to me, those two videos are it. Like you'll never see that now. But The Light was a video about a girl who has a field trip that day, and her mom is like, "Hey, baby, I know you have a field trip. I'm gonna walk you to the bus." And then, as the girl is on the bus getting ready to go on the field trip, the mom spots this backpack that her daughter really wanted. And her daughter had taken her like a few days before and showed her the backpack, like, "I really want this backpack," but she couldn't afford it at the time, so she decided she would buy it as a surprise for her daughter when her daughter got back from the field trip. The mom's a waitress at a restaurant. She is pushing a cart in the restaurant, serving people. All of a sudden, there's a news report on the news, and it's a picture of a bus, and she just breaks down. Turns out her daughter, all her daughter friends, killed in this bus accident. So then they show a scene later on of the mom getting up, going through the same routine she did when her daughter was alive. And she's eating the banana and yogurt, I think, and you can tell the mom is getting ready to leave the house for the day. But the mom is also getting ready with the backpack that we know was the backpack she wanted to give her daughter, but the daughter's not around. And she goes to the edge of like the ocean, the sea, or whatever, and she just sits and she cries, holding this backpack, thinking of her daughter who passed away. And you don't find out that the daughter passed away until the mom gets to the sea with the backpack, and that's when you realize that the daughter had died. Well, the reason why the video was so impactful is, number one, the acting was impeccable. The song had this really beautiful lyric to us to it that really matched the vibe, like it's like me and you forever or something like that, but it was a really beautiful lyric. But also, this video came out, I want to say, within a few months of the Sewol Ferry tragedy, like very, very close to the time that that happened. And there just hadn't been any video that had explicitly showed kind of the way people felt about the song. Like there had been one of these nights which people had inferred was about the Sewol Ferry tragedy. There had been Red Light by FX that was about kind of the uselessness of government regarding the Sewol Ferry tragedy. And there had been like a lot of other videos. I want to say one of the members of Infinite did a video about a fan who died in the Sewol Ferry tragedy. There have been other dedications, but there hadn't been any videos that like explicitly spelled out like the emotions of these families. How for some families, the child that died is their only child, is their best friend, is like a huge part of the reason why they go about their day, why they do the things that they do, and what a devastating loss it was for some of them to find out that their child died on the news. On the news. So yeah, I mean it's a brilliant video. It's a brilliant video. And then like K Will's Please Don't. If you are somebody watching me who has never seen Please Don't by K Will, I am not allowed to talk about this with you. I'm just gonna tell you now. If you've never seen K Will's Please Don't, I cannot talk about that video with you. Like there's actually like a legal disclaimer that you have to participate in before you're allowed to watch the video that says if somebody's never watched the video, you're not allowed to spoil it, you're not allowed to discuss it, you have to pretend as if it doesn't exist, other than to reference it by saying, "Have you watched this video?" So legally, I'm not allowed to go any further into what K Will's Please Don't is about, but I will say this. If you've never watched it, I not only recommend you to watch K Will's Please Don't, but I also will say we will never get another video like that again. We will never get another video like that again. We will never get another video like that again. K Will has had some really good videos. Don't get me wrong. That is his magnum opus. He'll never do any better. Also, K Will looks like Daesung from Big Bang. But that video, it is a perfect video. It is a perf. It is the only perfect video that exists. It is the only perfect video that exists. There's nothing wrong with that video in any way, shape, or form. Everything about that video is right. Everything about that video is right. Everything about that video is classic. Everything about that video, I would never change a thing. I wouldn't change a single thing about that video. Anyone in the room? Is there anyone in the room who hasn't seen it? Just leave it. Say something to me. Tell me if you've not seen it. If you've never seen it and you want to watch it, please leave a comment below this to tell me how you feel about watching the video. Please, please let me know. I've there's very few moments in life that I want to relive where I'm like, man, I'd love to do that again for the first time. This is one of those things. That video is literally me wishing I could watch it again for the first time because it's so incredible. It's so incredible. Like I wish I could watch K Will's Please Don't again for the first time. I wish I could watch Fantastic Baby by Big Bang for the first time again. Um, I wish I could hear Shiny Sherlock again for the first time. That was a moment. That was a moment. Um, I wish that. Oh, thank you, Sarah. I hope you enjoy it. There's certain moments in music and K-pop where like I wish I could do that again. I wish I could hear Amy Winehouse for the first time again. Like real talk, I wish I could hear Amy Winehouse for the first time again. I remember the very first time I heard Rehab, I heard it on the radio. I had no idea who Amy Winehouse was, had never heard of her, nothing. And they played it on the radio. And the very first thing you hear is, they tried to make me go to rehab. And I said, no, no, no. And I remember thinking, who is this? Is this an old song? Like, are they saying they're going to rehab? What's going on here? And then I saw the video for the first time and I'm like, oh, it's a white girl? Who is this? And, after that, I was done. I listened to the Back to Black album and every song was giving me something. Every song. Like, it is one of the few perfect albums ever made. It really is. It's a perfect album. Me and Mrs. Jones, I'm no good. Tears Dry on Their Own. Ugh. Tears Dry on Their Own. I remember when she died, I must have listened to Tears Dry on Their Own like at least 10 times. Ugh. I know a lot of people listened to Back to Black when she died. I didn't want to hear that. I wanted to hear Tears Dry on Their Own because it has such a soaring bridge. Anyway, yeah, I'm gonna go because I have stuff to do and also like I said, I gotta go back for lunch. But thank you for joining me with this live stream. This wasn't much. I wasn't doing much here, but I think we had a good time. I had a good time. Anyway, I'll talk to you later. And again, if you've never watched K Will's Please Don't, it's called Please Don't. It's by K period Will. K Will. If you've never watched that video before, please watch it. It's great. It's great. It's fucking great. Ah, um, if you're gonna watch it for the first time, I'm so happy for you. Bye.